What is a social justice warrior? It's someone who cares, someone who abhors inequality, someone who wants to bring the world together. Statistically, it's a rich white person who likes to yell at other rich white people while denouncing both richness and whiteness. As a recently indoctrinated social justice warrior myself, allow me to spread our good word to your eyes and ears, and if you click away from this video, you're a bigot. Commandment 1. Thou shalt categorize all group majorities as tyrannical oppressors, except thine own. Life is an endless war between the haves and have-nots. Whatever anyone has, if other people don't, it's a result of inequality, and in most cases large-scale theft. To be a social justice warrior is to see the world as a battlefield of privilege and conquest, and all those who come out on top as bloodthirsty tyrants who will do anything to stay in power. The United States is roughly 60% white, therefore 60% of the United States is oppressing the other 40% made up of marginalized minority groups who are struggling to succeed in a white supremacist society, called such because majority and supremacy are two words that mean the exact same thing according to our SJW dictionary. And by marginalized minority groups, we mean everybody except Asians. Social justice warriors don't like Asians. More on that later. But despite our hatred of majorities that exist outside our realm of control, majorities we do control are just fine and dandy, like school administrators and professors in universities who lean overwhelmingly to our side. This is an acceptable majority, though, because it's a majority of people who share or at least don't oppose the social justice agenda. And if the world was 100% attuned to our ideologies with zero dissent, that would be terrific. And isn't that the real dream? To finally put an end to tyranny by instituting our own? After all, like socialism, real tyranny hasn't been tried yet. Commandment 2. Thou shalt create a hierarchy of skin colors and put the darkest at the top. What are humans if not just bags of skin walking the earth? Our species is wretched. It destroys the planet it inhabits and hunts or tortures the other creatures of the world. From an outside perspective, we are parasitic overlords who collectively drain the life from our immediate surroundings, so it makes sense to judge ourselves on the surface by no more than what we can visibly see. To do otherwise would be to give credence to the idea that humans are individuals, regardless of their appearance and categorizations. A dangerous game, to be sure. Individuals are harder to corral and shepherd towards what we tell them salvation is. It's much easier to reduce them to collective hive minds based on the color of their skin, so we can lead them as one massive unit towards what we decide is best for them. Such is the rationale of the social justice warrior, who links the idea of minorities to the idea of victimhood, where if you don't succeed in life as a minority, it's because you're a minority. It's not your fault you were born the way you are. It's society's fault for failing to accommodate whatever terrible individual qualities you may have. You're a victim of an oppressive system designed to exclude you because of your race. But don't worry, just take my hand, and I will carry you to the promised land without you having to earn a goddamn thing because of your race. For you see, the answer to supposed racial injustice is definitively racial justice. Are you doing poorly in school? It's because your teacher's probably racist, so here, have a scholarship on us. We could have given it to this Asian kid who got perfect scores on his SAT, but so many of them are smart anyway, who cares if a couple of them run into actual verifiable institutional racism at our own behest that closes doors of opportunity for them. We need less Asians in college and more black people because we don't tolerate discrimination of any kind. That's just how the racial marginalization hierarchy works. Black people went through slavery, so they're at the top. The second rung is Muslims, which are not a race, but we treat them like one anyway. We're all for female empowerment, but if we called them out on their treatment of women, we'd be Islamophobes. And Islam is the only religion we respect for some reason. The third rung is Hispanics, but not all Hispanics, just immigrants. But not all immigrants, just illegal immigrants. The fourth rung is Native Americans, who we used to only give a shit about twice a year around Thanksgiving and Columbus Day, but now that Elizabeth Warren is 1024th Native, we're very socially conscious of them again, unless they come out against Warren's DNA test, in which case they should go back to their reservations and shut the fuck up. The fifth rung is Asian Americans, and now we're close to the bottom of the hierarchy. Asians are the highest median income earners in the United States, so they're basically white people with slanted eye holes who have IQ privilege even though we don't believe in IQ. We're really sick and tired of them succeeding because it counteracts our narrative that it's impossible to succeed if you're not white, so they're dead to us. And finally, at the very bottom of the racial hierarchy, you've got white people, scum of the earth. genocidal maniacs who have had it too acceptable for too long, whose descendants should pay for all the historical atrocities they've committed and should be ashamed of their heritage, which we don't believe even counts as a culture. All white people are born racist and die racist no matter what they do, but they can maybe be forgiven for their inherent sin of being, though probably not, if they commit to being an activist for social justice their entire lives by doling out apologetic reparations to all non-white people who deserve it because they were born non-white. Gee, an organization that instills a sense of worthlessness in you from the beginning that you can only maybe surmount by subscribing to all of its beliefs and following all of its practices? I wonder what that sounds like. Commandment 3. Thou shalt perceive all differing speech as hate speech and strive to silence it. So it's clear that the social justice ideology is the only true and good ideology, to the point where it's not even ideology anymore, but fact. And also it's just called being a decent human being, as a means of shutting down all opposition as indecent. Social justice warriors must be wary of any speech that seems to target marginalized individuals or even mention or include them at all. For example, if you hear someone say, "I was talking to this black guy at the mall recently," you must quickly jump down the throat of the person speaking and demand to know why he dared mention the race of the person in the story, even though you think race is the most important thing in the fucking world, and upon realizing that someone who is talking is black, you listen more intently to what they have to say because they're black, which means their opinion is also black, and therefore marginalized, and therefore in need of championing, because again, the duty of the social justice warrior is to coddle minorities as if they are tiny, helpless babies who can do nothing for themselves. Race is extremely important, except when it arbitrarily isn't. Remember that. Another aspect of this to note is that all comedy is hate speech. Jokes are oppressive forms of speech that target an item, person, or idea and lower its position in the world to raise themselves up. There is no such thing as a harmless joke because there is no such thing as a joke without a target, and targeting people is hateful and discriminatory, like targeted harassment and bullying. Jokes are the tools of tyrants, and they must be taken just as seriously. This is where deplatforming comes into play, our most trusted method of eliminating hate speech by driving it underground where we can pretend it no longer exists and fail to keep tabs on how it's developing. We believe in free speech, but ours is the only speech that is free from hate, so we're the only group it applies to. The First Amendment is only an amendment after all, which means it didn't apply to the original Constitution, and even though the Constitution is a racist and sexist document written by racist and sexist men, we can pick and choose what we like about it to suit our needs at the time. Commandment 4. Thou shalt regularly confuse the terms depiction and promotion. When a World War II movie or video game contains Nazi imagery, the excuse for its inclusion is always historical accuracy. But as social justice warriors, we know it's a racist dog whistle meant to promote Nazism in secret. That's because depiction and promotion are one and the same. If you choose to depict something, you must naturally promote what it stands for, or else you wouldn't have included it. Even if you paint the Nazis in your movie as evil, and the plot is about your triumph over evil, the existence of evil itself is a rallying cry for evil people all over the world. That's why it is a firm social justice belief that movies must contain no evil. Only heroes who stand for good social justice values like diversity, inclusion, representation, and other words that are all the same shit. If evil is even implied off-screen by sound effects or story elements, it is a full endorsement of their existence and should result in the studios responsible being shut down permanently. Commandment 5. Thou shalt always champion diversity of race, unless it also means diversity of thought. We believe conservatives are evil, racist, sexist, bigoted, and white supremacists, even the black ones, who are traitors to their own kind and not worthy of the race cards we decide when they own. When they support Trump, we call them minstrel characters dancing for their slave masters, or Black Klansmen now that that movie's coming out. Our love, respect, admiration, and most importantly, pity for people of color extends only to people of color who vote Democrat, because the rest have been brainwashed by white oppression and have lost their colored souls in the process. We love people of color, but we hate Republicans more. We're also resentful of classical liberals because they won't go as far as we do, but we need their support anyway, so most of our dynamic is just pretending we're more or less extreme than we are to each other to try and preserve mutual relationships relations while we both talk shit behind our backs? Classical liberals say outlandish things like free speech is paramount and we should engage in discussions with the other side. They're in real danger of becoming racist, sexist bigots, so we have to keep them in check at every opportunity by fiercely condemning them whenever they stray too far from our thought pack. Commandment 6. Thou shalt not settle for less than perfect character. When it comes to the ideas and credibility of a person, one lonely pineapple on a single piece of pepperoni pizza can ruin the whole pie. People do not have the luxury of separating themselves into good and bad parts. They must be judged purely by their most unpleasant quality. If one part of them is terrible, all of them is terrible. So think about that the next time you decide to carelessly quote Winston Churchill or Thomas Jefferson or anyone. An apology on Twitter will not win you back our support, but it will make other people dislike you for caving to our loud emotional feelings, and since we no longer support you, we consider that a good thing. Commandment 7. Thou shalt endeavor to erase all unpleasant history from modern minds. Our country's history is shameful. None know that better than us social justice warriors. We weaponize it against objects of our disdain all the time, namely white people, concerning slavery. But we also want physical reminders of our past to go away, like Confederate statues and monuments, so nobody is unnecessarily triggered by inescapable history. We want the historically marginalized people of our country to be able to be proud Americans, and the only way to achieve that is for us warriors to wipe the slate clean, gain complete control of the government at all levels, and turn the entire system on its ass in a way that will completely destabilize everything and run our nation into the ground. Simple. Only from the ashes can we rebuild a nation of true equality after banishing about half the white people to other countries to do away with any large group majority. They'll be fine. They're privileged wherever they are, especially in North Korea and the Middle East. This erasure principle also applies to old television shows that were evocative of their time, but not properly diverse or PC enough for our new modern standards of thought, which is why we must reboot franchise after franchise, like Thomas the Tank Engine, with more current PC culture to appeal to children who care so much about that stuff. It's why we must denounce so-called classic Disney movies like Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, and The Little Mermaid for promoting gender roles and non-feminist propaganda, rather than the new instant classics like Frozen that people definitely still give a second thought about. Commandment 8. Thou shalt take to the streets whenever possible to disrupt the lives of thine enemies. Because of our classification of all other groups of thought as racist, sexist, etc., it's very easy for us to strip these people of their inherent humanity, and we should, because what they believe is inhuman and wrong, like capitalism, for instance. I mean, how many poor people have to die on the streets before they realize that the only way to end poverty is for all of us to be dirt poor and dying on the streets? It would certainly eliminate inequality. You cannot argue with that. Our ultimate goal is for everyone in America to have the same size tombstone. Anyway, because our enemies are basically demons in flesh suits, we can hound and harass them ad nauseum, lots and lots and lots of nauseum, without feeling a shred of remorse. These people dare sit at the top of a man-made hierarchy system that existed long before humans and implement policies we don't agree with? We've killed people for less. We have killed people for less. And when we're not killing people for less, we're simply vividly fantasizing about killing them for less. So of course these subhuman monsters spawned from the pits of hell don't deserve a moment of peace, whether it's at a restaurant or their own homes. It is our civic duty as political lemmings to follow our brothers and sisters off intellectual cliffs and scream at the top of our lungs while we hold signs we made in college for class credit. Protesting helps us graduate. Getting arrested for it makes our resumes look better. Look that shit up because it's real. Amy Schumer and Emily what's-her-last-name are heroes because while they were protesting Brett Kavanaugh, the police asked them if they wanted to be arrested and they said yes. And then they sat on the fucking floor with twist ties on their hands like the martyrs they are. And those are the 8 commandments of the social justice warrior. 10 would have had a nicer ring to it, but I ran out of ideas. Subscribe to the channel for more videos, follow me on Twitter at SunburnedAlbino, and you can support the channel on Patreon at patreon.com/sunburnedalbino, and I'll see you guys next time.